The Senate will come to order. Those not having privileges of the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we're led in prayer by Pastor Bo Burgess of the Jordan Baptist Church at Gallipolis Ferry of West Virginia. Please remain standing after the prayer as the junior senator from the 16th leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor.
Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day that you've given us. Lord, we come to you. We acknowledge today that, Lord, we're sinners that has fallen short of your glory. We've broken your law. We deserve death and hell. But Lord, we thank you. We acknowledge that you have demonstrated your love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, you sent your Son, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, God in the flesh, to die for our sin, to shed his blood, that we might be forgiven, to be saved, and to have eternal life in heaven. Lord, you've told us in your word that salvation is not just about a religion or a denomination, but it's about a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but by me. Lord, I pray that you would help us to be convicted of our sin today. Help us to realize that we need a Savior, and his name is Jesus. The Bible says if we'll confess our sin, if we'll confess with our mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in our hearts that God hath raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. Lord, help us. Help our state, our country to turn back to you. We ask it all in Jesus' name, and amen.
Amen. Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please join me as we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Got it, does.
Reading of the Journal.
West Virginia Legislature, Senate Journal, January 23rd, 2023. The Senate met at 11:01 a.m.
Senior Senator from the 8th requests unanimous consent for further reading of the journals dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Senate will be at recess. Introduction to guest. On behalf of the Senate, it is my pleasure to welcome the honorary pages for the day. Please stand and be recognized as your name is called. As the guest is the Senator from Summers, Jessa Hill, Alexis Broyles, and Marshall White. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome? Further introduction, Junior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it is your honor and mine to introduce our doc of the day. In the rear of the chamber with us today, we have Dr. Josiah Bodley from Wheeling, West Virginia. He's a first-year family medicine resident. If you wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Are there further introductions? Senator from Mason.
Thank you, Mr. President. On your behalf and on behalf of the senior senator from the 4th Mine, we have a Mason County Commissioner in attendance in the President's Gallery. He is also happens to be a dear friend of mine who is also my high school basketball coach. So if everybody would please make him feel welcome.
Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today is one of my favorite days as the chair of the military committee, that we get to welcome so many veterans here to the state capitol. I'm sure a lot of you have noticed the men and women who are wearing certain hats and jackets indicating that they are members of veteran organizations all around the state that have come here to join us today. So I think we want to make them feel welcome, but I think it's also important to make those veterans around the state who aren't able to join us, to let them know that they're always welcome to visit here. Just today, I saw that we had a World War II veteran in Monroe County that turned 100 years old and was given a recognition for that milestone. I know another veteran who's 102 that lives in Harrison County. There are several across the state like that aren't able to join us, but should always feel welcome here as well. And so if we could all welcome the veterans that are here and joining us today to the Senate, thank you very much.
Senator from Logan.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of myself and my colleague from the 7th, I think we got some veterans from Logan, Boone, Lincoln, Kanawha County, and right now I still represent Mingo and Wayne County. If they would stand in the chamber, make them welcome, and thank you for everything y'all have done and continue to do.
Senator from Cabell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Two introductions. First, I'd like to recognize the young man who's been introduced previously, Lucas Murray, who's our page, and I'd like his mother, Lori Murray, to stand on behalf of my senior senator from the 5th. Stand and be welcome, wherever she is. And again, on behalf of my senior senator from the 5th, I'm going to guess that we have some veterans here from Cabell or Wayne County. And if they are here, would you please stand and be recognized?
Further introduction, Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senator from Greenbrier and myself, we have seated with us today in the President's Gallery the chaperones for our honorary pages. Would you please stand when I call your names? Have Jessa Hill's parents, Gary and Amanda Hill. Alexa Boyle's parents, Heather and Heather Broyles, and Marshall White's parents, Michael and Kimberly White. Thank you for being here with us today, and would the Senate make you feel welcome?
Further introduction, Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate and the senators that represent Wayne County, seated in our North Gallery is Sarah Chapman. Sarah, please stand. She's here today as an officer member of the Huntington VFW Auxiliary. She's concerned about the potential consolidation of the Guyandotte and Huntington VFW posts. So, Senate, please join me and make her welcome.
Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank all of the veterans from District 1 for coming up, especially Vern Anderson and John Powell, if you could stand and be recognized. And I also want to thank Paul Zuros, the Hancock County Administrator, for being here today. Thank you.
Senator from Wyoming.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to introduce the teachers who are chaperoning all of the middle school students, all of the schools represented from Wyoming County Middle Schools to Youth in Government. And those teachers are Sharon Cook, Andrew Thomas, Jill Backert, and Laura Manning. They are all standing, I believe, in our South Gallery. If we could give them all a big hand. Please stand, folks.
Further introductions, Senator from Harrison.
President, friends from Harrison County are joining us today. On behalf of Senator Martin, I'd like to welcome Nellie and Bob Osborne, who's advocating for the AARP down here in Charleston. If the Senate would please make them feel welcome.
Senator from Wood.
Well, Mr. President, I'm not sure which gallery the gentleman's in, but the new Ritchie County County Commissioner, newly appointed, Steve Ritter. Steve, if you would stand up wherever you are. I'm told you're in the gallery somewhere. There he is. Okay, thank you very much. Would the Senate make him feel well?
Are there further introductions? Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of committee substitute for House Bill 2530 relating to the extension of the expiration of temporary registration plates from 60 days to 90 days.
Message be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
House Bill 2533 relating to a permanent windshield placard to be valid for the duration of the applicant's life.
Message will be received, Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the committee reference be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Communications from the executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources has had under consideration Senate Bill 202, increasing appointment term of Director for DNR from 4 to 7 years, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Bill Hamilton, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Banking and Insurance has had under consideration Senate Bill 209, permitting resident individuals to deduct medical expenses not reimbursed by insurance policy, and reports back a committee substitute for same, and Senate Bill 292, Healthcare Sharing Ministries Freedom to Share Act, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the two committee substitutes do pass, but under the original double committee references, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Michael T. Azinger, Chair.
Report will be received. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to the Committee on Finance for the Senate Bill 292 be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Under the original double committee reference, Senate Bill 209 will be referred to the Committee on Finance.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration Senate Bill 211 relating to permanent windshield placard to be valid for duration of applicant's life, and reports back a committee substitute for same, and Senate Bill 233 extending expiration of temporary registration plates from 60 to 90 days, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the two committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bills be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The bills will be referred to the Committee on Rules.
Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure has had under consideration Senate Bill 254, changing annual mandatory state vehicle inspections to every 2 years, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Charles H. Clements, Chair.
Report will be received. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to the Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 276, awarding service weapon of retiring state fire marshal, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Military has had under consideration Senate Bill 283 relating to military incentive program and has amended same, and reports the same back with the recommendation that it do pass as amended, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Finance. Respectfully submitted, Ryan W. Weld, Chair.
Report will be received. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the second reference to Committee on Finance be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 298 relating to non-federally declared emergencies and non-states of emergency, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the committee substitute do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
Report will be received.
Your Committee on Military has had under consideration Senate Bill 419, amending professions and occupations licensure provisions for individuals with military training, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation the committee substitute do pass, but under the original double committee reference, first be referred to the Committee on Government Organization. Respectfully submitted, Ryan W. Weld, Chair.
Report will be received, and under the original double committee reference, the bill will be referred to the Committee on Government Organization. Report from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 447 through Senate Bill 464 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on our chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bills 447 through Senate Bill 464 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Resolution 13 by Senators Rucker and Woodrum observing the 90th anniversary of the Holodomor Ukrainian genocide of 1932 to 1933.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day.
Senate Resolution 14 by Senator Blair, Mr. President, designating January 25th, 2023 as Aviation Day at the Legislature.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over one day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
Senate Resolution 12 commemorating 77th Southern Legislative Conference of Council of State Governments, Southern Office.
Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the resolution be taken up for immediate consideration, committee reference be dispensed with, and the resolution be placed upon its adoption.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. The clerk will read the resolution.
Senate Resolution 12 commemorating the 77th Southern Legislative Conference of the Council of State Governments, Southern Office.
Question is on adoption of the resolution. Is there discussion? Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. For the members, this July, the Council of State Governments South, which includes West Virginia, of course, will hold their 77th Legislative Conference in Charleston, South Carolina, where more than 1,500 Southern legislators, government staff, and their families will gather to discuss policy matters specifically affecting Southern states and to collaborate on those solutions. For the past 76 years, the Southern Legislative Conference has convened annually to host 15 Southern states that make up the CSG South. The CSG South provides legislators and government staff with a variety of programs and services that facilitate and encourage the exchange of information. I do encourage all members to use them. They're a great resource if you're having questions and wondering what other states are doing on an issue. Recently, an invitation was extended to the CSG South Executive Committee to allow West Virginia to host the 2024 Southern Legislative Conference. The Executive Committee accepted that invitation, and this past July at the Southern Legislative Conference in Oklahoma City, our Senate President was named the chair-elect. West Virginia is looking forward to hosting the 78th Legislative Conference in 2024. Mr. President, congratulations, and I urge adoption of the resolution.
Is there further discussion? If not, the question is on adoption of the resolution. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the resolution adopted. Bills on third reading.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 10, Campus Self-Defense Act, third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee substitute for Senate Bill 10 creates the West Virginia Campus Self-Defense Act. It does that by amending 4 different sections in Chapter 18B, but the bulk of it is in a new section that's added in Chapter 18B, Article 4, and it's designated as Section 5B. With the enactment of this bill, West Virginia would join 11 other states which expressly permit concealed carry on state university or institution campuses. The other states which currently permit this are Arkansas, Colorado, Georgia, Idaho, Kansas, Mississippi, Oregon, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Wisconsin. And I know there are other states in which this type of legislation is being considered. I know the members of this body, half of which are sponsors of the bill, are well familiar with its provisions, but I do want to spend a little time talking about it because there's been a little bit of public misinformation about it, and I do want to clarify it for such viewers and listeners as we may have for our proceedings. In subsection A of the new section, the law makes it clear that subject to the provisions of the next subsection, a person holding a current and valid concealed carry permit or provisional permit may carry a concealed pistol or revolver on the campus and in the buildings of a state institution of higher ed. So let me pause there for a second. This authority applies only to people who have a valid concealed carry permit, or the 18-year-old, the provisional permit we created for people between 18 and 21. In other words, it requires everyone to undergo training. They have to have firearms training because you have to have that to get the permit. This does not apply to, we created what has been referred to as constitutional carry or a permitless carry a few years ago, where any adult citizen of West Virginia who has the legal right to own and possess a firearm can carry. The provisions of this bill do not apply in that context. It requires anybody who would avail himself or herself of it to have a valid permit. There are exceptions, and there are exceptions in subsection B, and so it makes clear there's a whole list, and I'm going to talk about most, if not all of them, but exceptions when people cannot carry and avail themselves of carrying on college campuses. First is at an organized event in a place with a seating capacity of over 1,000 spectators. So we're eliminating, there is no right to carry, concealed or otherwise, in the stadia, the basketball arenas, those sorts of places. Any place that has a seating capacity of more than 1,000 spectators. That's number one. Two, at any daycare facility which is located on the property of the state university or college. Three, in the secure area of any building used by a law enforcement agency on the property of a state institution of higher education. Four, in an area of the property of a state institution of higher ed that has adequate security measures in place to ensure that pistols, revolvers are not carried by the public into that area. And there's a definition of adequate security measures, but basically what it means is a metal detector, a guard, a person with a wand. In other words, the university, any college or university wants to say, we want this building to be gun-free, they can do it. But they have to make sure that nobody's going to be able to get a gun in there. They have to provide, as there are here at the front door of the Capitol, the public entrances, a guard, a metal detector, somebody with a wand. 5, in an on-campus room or rooms in which a student or employee disciplinary proceeding is being held. So if you're having, an expulsion hearing or a disciplinary hearing regarding a faculty member, nobody can carry, the university can prohibit anybody from carrying guns into that situation. 6, sole occupancy offices on the campus and in the buildings of the state institution of higher ed. And there's a definition of sole occupancy office. It's a room with at least one door and walls that extend to the ceiling that's assigned to a single person or workspace. This subdivision does not authorize the state institution of higher ed to restrict faculty or staff members who hold a current license from carrying a concealed pistol or revolver in his or her own assigned office. 7, and this is important because you have occasions when there are cooperative arrangements or events that are made between colleges and universities on the one hand and public ed, K through 12 on the other. And so the exception to the carry rules applies at a primary or secondary education school-sponsored function being held in a location on the state institution that is either rented or leased or under the exclusive use the Department of Education, the Secondary Schools Activities Commission, a county school board, or a local public school. 8, a private function that's being held at a specific location on the property of an institution, state institution of higher ed, that is rented or leased or under the exclusive use of an entity that is not affiliated with the state institution of higher ed. 9, in any area on the property of the state institution of higher education where possession of a firearm is prohibited by other state or federal law. 10, in specifically designated areas in which patient care or mental health counseling is being provided. So there's no right to carry in those areas. 11, in a high hazardous or animal laboratories, and there's a definition there of what that means. But so those areas are off limits for concealed carry. 12, in campus residence halls, except common areas such as lounges, dining areas, and study areas. Subsection C of the bill says that an employee whose employment responsibilities require him or her to be in an on-campus residence hall and who holds a valid concealed carry license is permitted to carry a concealed revolver on or about his person while present in on-campus residence halls for purposes of his or her employment. So we're not restricting the university's authority or a college's authority to designate people that they want to have carry in those areas. Subsection D requires colleges and universities to provide either, 1, a secure location for storage of a pistol or revolver in at least one of the institution's on-campus residence halls, or 2, make available an appropriate safe that may be installed in a residence room in any of the institution's on-campus residence halls. And further down in the bill, subsection E allows the college or university to charge a fee for that service. So this bill in subsection F makes it clear that the university, a college or a university may, they're not precluded from taking action against a student or an employee who is convicted of a violation of 61-714, which is carrying firearms where they're not permitted to on other people's property. Subsection G is important because it makes clear that even though we're granting authority in this bill, if it passes, for concealed carry, there is no open carry. So the law prohibits, whether you have a permit or not for concealed carry, the law prohibits open carry or brandishing of a weapon on college or university campuses. In any way causing, threatening a breach of the peace, regardless of whether the firearm is holstered. So the bill addresses only concealed carry. To the extent it addresses open carry, it prohibits it. Subsection H says that conduct of a person shall not be construed to be an act of the state institution. So what we're trying to do here within that section of the bill is insulate the colleges and universities, the institutions, from liability for actions that are taken or might be taken by a student or a faculty member who's exercising his right under this statute. There's a definition of license to carry a weapon. The act is styled and named as the Campus Self-Defense Act, and the final subsection makes it clear that the provisions of it has an internal effective date. So the provisions of this law, even if enacted by the legislature this year, will not go into effect until July 1st of 2024. Not this July, but next July. Mr. President, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, Senator from Marion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate that. I'm looking at the sponsors of the bill, and I believe there's enough sponsors on this bill to pass without any other votes, so I fully expect to be covered in a sea of green when we vote today. But I rise in opposition to this, Mr. President. I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a bad idea to basically encourage folks to carry weapons on campus. I just don't know why we would want to put our youth in an atmosphere such as that. And if you look at who doesn't like this bill, domestic violence advocates hate it. The WVU student government passed a proclamation saying they didn't want it. I heard from the faculty senate that said they should leave it up to the institutions. And I talked about this on talk radio last week with Hoppy, and I said, so who wants this bill? And he looked at me and he said, well, you know who wants the bill. The NRA wants the bill. The gun lobby wants the bill. I said, now stop and think about what you just said. Stop and think about what you just said. We're going to let a lobby group control the rules and regulations of a higher education facility in West Virginia. That, to me, Mr. President, just does not make good sense. And I've heard from people throughout this debate, not this time, but the last time the debate was around, from out-of-state folks who sent their kids to WVU. And while they were checking the boxes on where they thought would be the best institution to send their child, one of them was, do they allow guns on campus? And if that was a box they would check, that student wouldn't have came to WVU. I'm really, really concerned about what kind of image we portray to people who want to send our kids to our in-state institutions. Just last night, Mr. President, at 11:45, WVU sent out an alert. Shots fired. Gunshots at or near Grant Avenue. Seek shelter, avoid area. Later, they sent out an all clear. Now, I know that the proponents of this bill are saying right now, that wasn't a good guy with a gun, that was a bad guy with a gun. And I get that, and I appreciate that argument. I've been around here a long time, and I respect everybody's opinion on these type of issues. But I just can't, Mr. President, in good faith, stand here and not speak for those who don't want to see this implemented in West Virginia. And you know, I talked about how I haven't heard much from the smaller universities and how they haven't been much of a player throughout this debate. I don't know whether they just kind of given up or they think there's a worse bill if this one doesn't pass. But finally, we did hear from three in-state universities, West Virginia State, Concord, and Shepherd. And I'm going to read a few things that they said in their letter, Mr. President. Introducing firearms into this already challenging environment could have unintended consequences. Research demonstrates that ready access to firearms substantially increase suicide risks, especially among young adults. They also said if enacted, this legislation would require our universities to make significant new investments in our public safety and security operations to include the addition of new law enforcement personnel, equipment, and infrastructure to ensure compliance with the intent of this legislation and to safeguard the security of our campus. They estimate that it could cost state colleges and universities up to $11.6 million, which we did not provide in this piece of legislation. As under-resourced institutions that continue to adapt to the economic challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic, we simply do not have the financial resources to implement and administer the requirements of Senate Bill 10. It's very concerning, Mr. President. We always talk about unfunded mandates and how we think those are horrible ideas, and we should refrain from doing that. And also, Mr. President, I heard from a faculty member at WVU, and I'm going to read a few things from him, so bear with me. I just think it's important that however this comes out, which we all know how it's going to be, that you hear this and the public hears the concerns of people who think this is a bad idea. Allowing concealed firearms on campus will not make campus a safer place. We know this not only because research has shown it to be true or because our law enforcement experts tell us so, but because it makes common sense. A trait any good West Virginian takes pride in. More guns means more opportunity for guns to discharge and for people to get shot. You don't need a college degree to do the math. Mr. President, what struck me about this letter is the final paragraph. He was not a West Virginian by birth, but a West Virginian by choice. And he says, I would never have come to this state if a concealed carry had been allowed on college campuses. I would have written off the state as having backward preoccupation with guns and questionable priorities. Now, 15 years later, I am unlikely to remain in this state should our elected officials choose wrongly and pass these bills. Mr. President, I'm deeply concerned, and you know, for full disclosure, I'm a gun owner. I own handgun, own rifles, own shotguns. I have a concealed carry permit. So for those who are out there just saying I'm anti-gun and anti-NRA, that is just as false as it could be. But I'm for responsible gun ownership, Mr. President. And I just think the atmosphere in college campuses where kids are partying and learning and growing up and things happen. They just do. They just do. And I dread the thought that handguns will be so easily accessible by those when bad things start happening on campus. Mr. President, I'm certainly going to be a no, and I respect the work that the chairman and the committee put into this and the restrictions in there. I really, really do, Mr. Chairman. I really do appreciate your work, but I just think it's a bad idea for West Virginia. I think it sends the wrong message for West Virginia. And, Mr. President, I appreciate the time to speak on this.
Senator from Logan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Wow. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for getting us through your committee. I have been the lead sponsor of this bill. I am the lead sponsor of this bill, and I've been the lead sponsor of many since I've been in the Senate and in the House. Thank you. Thank you so much. For the shooting in Morgantown last night, that was in town. It wasn't on campus. They don't know for sure if it was a student or not. But to sit and think that guns are not in the campuses right now, you're fooling yourself. They're there. My daughter is 13 years old. I bought her 2 guns right before she turned 4 years old for Christmas. Pink camouflage, but she was at that time, she liked pink. When she goes to college, she will have her concealed carry permit. And if I can work it out where she can have the provision of somehow I can get her in the guard or whatever, get her where she can have it, I want her to have it. But I can promise you she will have it around her all the time. This is freedom. This is America. Our veterans have fought for our freedom. We've had veterans die, or our soldiers die. These gentlemen has brothers and sisters that was left in Vietnam and Korea and Iraq and Afghanistan. This is freedom. You know, like the chairman stated, 11 states have it. I see Mississippi's on there. Mississippi beat us. I want to be 12th. I'd like to be in 1. California, gun-free zone. What just happened there the other day? Guy killed, I think, was it 9? New York, no guns. Chicago, no guns. Where's all the violence at? Let me tell you where violence ain't. Kennesaw, Georgia. Their gun ordinance in their town that at least one person has to own a gun and ammunition. One of the lowest cities in America for low crime. That's awesome. Mr. President, I think that's something we ought to look at in the future, that at least every household in West Virginia, that's another bill. You know, going through my notes here a little bit, I'm proud to be from West Virginia. And this is what West Virginia is. It's even on our seal. We got a gun on our seal. I know some people will probably try to get that removed off, but we also got coal, which everybody knows I'm a big supporter of coal. That's another bill. But all I can say is, God bless West Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for all the sponsors. Let's get this through. Let's get this over to the House. I know the House is eager to receive this bill. And again, thank God for West Virginia and freedom that these folks up here in the gallery has gave us year after year after year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Wood.
Mr. President, I will be quick. My good friend from Marion mentioned the Student Government Association. There was, however, a little bit of a dissent among a couple of the senators in an otherwise pretty liberal group, but they sent me a statement. I wanted to read it quickly. On Wednesday, January 18, 2023, the West Virginia University Student Government Association passed AP 2023-0101. The proclamation's purpose was to oppose SB 10, which would allow students the right to self-protection and self-preservation through campus carry. Despite mixed opinions by the student body, as indicated by a previously conducted survey in which 49% of students did not oppose campus carry, the Assembly overwhelmingly voted to pass this proclamation. Senator Miller and I were the only two members in dissent. We fully support SB 10 and urge the legislators in Charleston to pass this piece of legislation. Many students at West Virginia University support the measure and believe the freedom to exercise our Second Amendment rights is vital, even on college campuses. So again, thank you for introducing the bill. We look forward to its complete passage. Thank you, Senator Miller and Senator Tommy Azinger, who may or may not be a chip off the old block. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Logan for a second time.
Just for a second. Thank you, Mr. President. Without saying which school, 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted on campus. 10% report is being raped. I don't want my daughter to have to face this. I don't want your daughter, your granddaughters to ever have to face that. That's another reason that we need to get this through, over, get it down to the governor, and get it signed. Thank you.
Senator from Morgan, you wish to close debate? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just briefly, I'll say a couple things. You know I got some of the same emails. I heard the senator from Marion talking about emails he'd received from people. I got some of those same emails. Some of them, Mr. President, come from people who would eliminate guns everywhere. And they make the argument, well, if there weren't any guns anywhere, we'd all be safer. I don't know that I agree with the logic of that. I don't. But in addition, there's something that stands in the way of that. A couple things. You know, our oath is to the Constitution of the United States. Everyone here knows the Second Amendment and what it says, and the Constitution of West Virginia. And so I'll read you, just take a second. It's Article 3, Section 22 of the West Virginia Constitution. A person has the right to keep and bear arms for defense of self, family, home, and state, and for lawful hunting and recreational use. So our provision in our state constitution is a good bit broader than that which is in the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution. And we're talking here about state institutions. We're not talking about private institutions. We're talking about the government. The state institutions represent the government of West Virginia, which is limited in what it can do because of the right that our state constitution affords to the citizens of this state. Now, it was said on the floor a little while ago that this bill allows the right. No, I don't think that's a correct characterization of the bill. I believe the West Virginia Constitution allows the right, and I think this bill is designed to give it life and to do so in a way, you know, we tried very hard. Now, I won't say that any public college or university in the state has a leadership that is supportive of this, although there are probably opposing views within the faculty and leadership of the institutions. But, you know, I don't think there's any, I'm not aware of any institution that's endorsed this, but they have said, if you're going to do it, if you're going to do this, there are a whole variety of things that we would like to see and we think need to be in this bill. And this, the bill before us, Mr. President, contains those things. We've tried very hard to accommodate this and do it in a common sense way that preserves and gives life to the citizens of the state, even those who are just college kids, a constitutional right they have to have a weapon for the defense of themselves. So I'm comfortable with passage of the bill, and I urge its passage.
Question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine. Ascertain the results on this question. 29 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill be used to make it so effective.
Senior Senator from the 17th moves the bill be made effective from passage and request unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 29 yeas, 4 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 207 relating to state allocation of funding to regional councils. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 207, currently in code we have 11 regional councils that are in contractually agreements with the Department of Economic Development. Currently there is money set aside for those regional councils, and they are divided up equally to each one of those councils. But currently, right now, there is a cap on it of $40,000. And in a couple of our meetings that we've had, the regional councils that came to us and asked us if we could have those caps removed because of all the infrastructure money that has been coming into the state. They need further allocation. So this bill simply removes that cap. And whatever increases they will be divided up equally to each one of the regional councils. Any questions? Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? If not, question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 231, transferring administration of West Virginia Small Business Innovation Research and Small Business Technology Transferring Matching Funds Program to Department of Economic Development. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Mercer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Due to a reorganization, the Department of Economic Development was moved from Commerce Department to a standalone agency. This bill simply clarifies that the reference funding streams go to the appropriate location with the Department of Economic Development. I urge passage of the bill.
Question is passes the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk close the machine and ascertain the results on this question. 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the actions of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Senate Bill 4, creating adopt-a-trail volunteer programs for public land under DNR jurisdiction. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 121, creating Student Journalist Press Freedom Protection Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 192, relating to Uniform Real Property Transfer on Death Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 208, relating to criminal justice training for all law enforcement and correction officers regarding individuals with autism spectrum disorders. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 244, making rosters of individuals who obtain professional, occupational, and trade licenses, registrations, and certificates available to public. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 245, making rules and regulations promulgated by PSC subject to legislative rulemaking review procedures. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 246, revising membership of Broadband Enhancement Council. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Woodrum moved to amend the bill by striking out everything after the enacting clause.
Senator from Summers.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from Summers.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 246 revises the membership of the Broadband Enhancement Council to reflect the loss of a congressional district. The bill is introduced and, as reported by the Committee on Government Organization, reduces the voting membership of the council by 2 members. Following committee action, the council proposed a solution that would keep the same number of members while still reflecting the loss of a congressional district. This amendment would implement that proposal, keeping the total number of voting members at 13. I'm happy to answer any questions and otherwise urge adoption of the amendment.
Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption amendment of the offered by the Senator from Summers. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 262, allowing students to transfer schools and retain athletic eligibility. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 264, prohibiting persons who have been convicted of certain crimes against minors from holding positions on boards of education. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading.
Senate Bill 21, requiring certain documents that contain wage records be considered confidential. First reading of the bill.
Bill will be advanced. Introduction to guest. Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of our county commissions from Jefferson County is here, and I would like her to please stand up so the Senate can make her feel welcome. And with her is, her name is Jennifer Krause, and with her is Doug Renner, a commissioner from Pleasants County. Will the Senate please make them feel welcome?
Are there further announcements? Remarks by members? Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given that today is Veterans Visibility Day, as I remarked earlier, I recognize those that were here and also discuss some veterans that weren't here and are able to make it. But I think that we should take a moment here to reflect upon one veteran that wasn't able to join us today. We haven't met officially in a regular session since the passing of Woody Williams last June. Woody Williams, of course, was the state of West Virginia's well, I should say he was the shining star of the state of West Virginia. He was the nation's last living Medal of Honor recipient from the World War II. And many of you, I'm sure, saw that his funeral was held in Washington, D.C. and here in West Virginia. And so if we could, Mr. President, in reflection of the veterans that can't be here today and recognizing Woody's passing, I'd like to hold a moment of silence. Thank you, Mr. President.
Please rise. Thank you. Please be seated. Other remarks by members? Miscellaneous business. Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th. What purpose is the Senator from Summers recognized?
Announcement.
We'll wait. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Subject to announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
I mean, that's not found in there, and the whole idea of that would just, if you have an ingress or egress point, you open the door and say, okay, we don't want you to go here. And they say, well, I determined that I'm going to go past this point into the danger. If the amendment passes, the National Guards people just have to say, walk on through, correct?
I mean, that could be one interpretation, because when you insert the right to self-determination, that's not legally defined, despite what the gentleman from, I don't know, Beckley is giving his rhetoric about. That's not defined. Okay. Yeah, I think he misquoted the Bill of Rights there. It's due process of law. He missed that one.
Well, I appreciate you.
Self-determination basically is reducing anybody to an autonomous individual, and they can do whatever they want. And basically, that's the first principle of the liberal order.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you very much, sir. May I speak to the bill?
Yes, gentleman is recognized.
Or to the amendment. I do think this, number one, we're not really talking about life, liberty, or property, because that's already defined and it's protected within the United States Constitution. This doesn't change that. This is a statute. These are executive powers that allow the governor to amend other statutes that are in the state of West Virginia, and to do so in circumstances which are protecting lives, again, not just of the people that may be in danger's way, but those people who you all love, who are not going to say, oh, they got past us, I guess they're over here, they're in a flood, they're in a fire, we told them not to go, they're going through, and we'll just let them, what happens, happens, right? We'll let that happen to them. No, they're going to go, and they're going to battle, and they're going to do everything they can to save their life, and they have children at home, and they have family members at home, and part of this is to make sure that we are not needlessly putting them in danger. I think that's an important thing to think about when you're voting on this bill. So, and voting on this amendment, I am a no on the amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman of 44th, Delegate Kirby, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I stand here today, I think about the fact that when I walked in here, I was fully prepared to vote for this bill. I was hoping that we would be able to pass the 30-day restriction. But now seeing the opposition to a simple statement that says that even in times of crises and times of states of emergency, we're willing to reject or at least oppose an amendment that states the most basic facts and rights of being an American, I have the feeling that at least on this side of the aisle, that the majority of us in here were elected in large part due to the promise to put this government in check. Not just this government, but the next government and the one after that for generations and generations to come.
We talk about this bill as if it's directed about floods. While we all know we're not talking about floods, we're talking about the next concocted emergency from our federal government or wherever it may come from. Our children were not stuck in their homes for months and months and months. Our friends did not lose their businesses. Our friends did not lose their homes. Our friends did not lose their wives and children in some instances because of a flood. They lost it because of the government's response to an emergency. So for us to sit here and debate as a legislative body whether or not to encapsulate this amendment into this bill is disheartening. And I hope that in a few minutes we can prove everybody wrong and do the right thing and support and vote yes on this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman from 37, Dr. Gearhart's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about emergencies. Emergencies. Things that we don't know are going to happen in the next moment. Things that are catastrophic. Earthquakes, pestilence, chemical explosions, floods. We don't know. We have no idea what's involved. They require immediate, decisive action. I believe in the tenets, the words of this amendment, and I believe they're guaranteed to me as an American. I believe that they are guaranteed to me as an American. In an emergency, action must be taken to preserve life, to preserve property, to preserve one's ability to self-determination. If we have an earthquake here, this building could be compromised. I believe your liberty to enter this building should probably be restricted. I doubt anyone here would question that. However, this amendment would in fact allow that. It would allow that. If there's a flood, your ability to enter the flood area would be restricted. However, it would preserve the life of those potentially trying to save you from your own actions. We have these rights as Americans, but we also have the right to take care of ourselves in states of emergency, and on occasion, one must sacrifice. Americans do sacrifice. We've done it in any number of occasions. Americans have sacrificed themselves to the draft to protect this country, to protect other Americans in case of an emergency. We're talking about an emergency. And we're limiting the governor's powers to cause all of the problems that we've just discussed. We're limiting that because of the things that we have seen. I'll fight anyone, anywhere, about the rights that are there. However, I believe inserting them in this bill, in this place, generates unintended negative consequences for West Virginians. As such, I'll oppose the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 53rd, Dr. Pritz, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the first yield?
Yeah, go ahead. Gentleman does yield.
So you've heard some of the issues that people have, members have brought up. How can those problems be most adequately handled in this bill?
What was the question again, real quick? I can't remember.
How can these problems be most adequately handled in this bill?
Well, I mean, if there is, so there's an epistemological problem. I mean, and that's one reason why it was rightful to probably have a 60-day duration before it terminates of a state of emergency, because, we need to understand different facts once an emergency arises. And, we don't really know what's happening at the local level yet. But if anything that's wrongly ordered does take place during the finite 60-day timeline that the governor has before his declared state of emergency ends under this bill, and we are called into special session and asked to extend. The bill offers a way just to extend the state of emergency, but with certain contingencies in the resolution that we would pass to extend the state of emergency. And those contingencies and restrictions could be the exact same things that we find that the executive is issuing and acting upon with executive orders that are wrongly ordered and that are abuses. And so once we sort of find out what the situation is on the ground, and that takes a little bit of time, once we're called back in, if we're asked to extend, and we do agree to extend, we could agree to terminate it, but if we do agree to extend, then we can take all the knowledge we've gained within that 60 days and put it into a resolution and say, hey, listen, here's the resolution, but we're going to extend the state of emergency you called, but contingent on this, you know, no more mask mandates, or, you know, no more mandatory vaccines, or, you know, some of the other abuses. Some of the my colleagues have stood up in support of this latest amendment about self-determination. And so I think that when we weigh the facts on the ground after 60 days, you know, we can begin to limit the particular powers in a much more precise and knowledgeable manner than simply declaring right from the get-go that it's every man for himself because he has a right to his own destiny by inscribing that into the statute of a state of emergency, because that sort of is antithetical with the whole concept of the state of emergency. Okay, and if you guys have been in the military, you'd probably understand you do want a unified command when you have an existential threat you have to face. So you can marshal certain resources together and adequately help and save our people. Okay, and so for those reasons, that would probably, I went on a little bit, answer, I think, your brief question there.
The question is still on the secondary amendment. Are there other members who wish to speak before the chair recognizes the sponsor to close debate? If not, chair recognizes. Yes, gentleman from the 96 ticket. Householder is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to urge rejection of the gentleman's amendment. And I do agree with the assessment from my colleague from the first. You know, I do have concern with the phrase self-determination, because the principle of that phrase does not show how the decision is to be made or what outcome it should be. I think the gentleman clearly described, is it anarchy or is it free choice? And for those reasons, I'm going to follow the lead of the gentleman from the first, and I urge rejection.
Okay, the gentleman from the 20th, Douglas Foster, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this phrase about individual self-determination, we've already had court cases on this, and there's been decisions, especially in the medical front, that you have your right to your own bodily autonomy, self-determination. For example, a perfect examination that's been brought up, it's like, okay, well, we could figure that out. The legislature could come in and say, oh, well, you can't do this, and we'll limit it further. Say, for example, let's say vaccination. Say, okay, well, the legislature comes in and says, well, your kid does no longer has to get the vaccination after this 60 days. Well, forced vaccination of your child, which I would assume that would already be ruled unconstitutional according to the constitutional standards medically, that's already been decided. But how many kids are going to forcibly get that vaccination before we put an end to it in that 60 days, or before the courts put an end to it? And that's where this is a problem, and I don't see the issue. It's basically we're saying that the Constitution applies now versus waiting till our 60-day time frame to say that it does, or the courts to make that determination. So I would support the gentleman's amendment.
The question again is on the secondary amendment. Okay, chair recognizes the gentleman, the 18th, Douglas Butler, to close debate on the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Great discussion here, and I sure appreciate it, and it's hard to improve upon some of the folks who have supported the amendment here. I'm going to try without messing it up. It's kind of interesting. I'm looking here at some quotes from about a year ago from the esteemed Vice Chair of the Government Organization Committee that I'm tempted to read, but I'm not going to do that. What I will do is address something dated March 6, 2020. Almost said 1920. March 6, 2020. This is the executive order from the governor. Whereas Order 9-20 ordered individuals to remain at their homes of residence except when performing essential activities and closed or otherwise limited to occupancy of businesses and entities. So the governor ordered us then to stay at home. That means we couldn't go anywhere unless he deemed it that we were essential. I wonder how many of us in this room actually obeyed that order. I wonder how many of our constituents obeyed that order. And I wonder what the consequences were to our constituents who obeyed that order. How about the businesses who were shut down, who had several employees, whose employees also lost their jobs? How about when the schools were shut down and our children were sitting at home supposed to learn from some kind of iPad or some kind of computer device? And we've had studies, and I've heard results of this, of the psychological damage, the mental problems that our children have had because they were isolated and deprived of their right to have education in West Virginia. Wrongly ordered. So we have a discussion, okay, if the governor orders something wrongly, we have the ability to come back and fix that. Yeah, that might be too late because the damage has already been done. In the example of a vaccine or something like that, someone might have a child who's allergic to some vaccine or something, and they're forced to take it under some emergency order. Okay, we'll come back in a few weeks or a few months and fix it. Damage is done. And we did nothing. We're here to represent our constituents back home. We're not here to represent the governor. We're not here to represent the Senate. We're here to represent our constituents. It made me sick to see my friends in the hospital, or actually had a friend in a nursing home whose father died. They were not able to go visit him because of a stinking emergency order that this body did nothing about. I sat at home for the last 2 years and watched this, which is why I ran and came back here. I ran a campaign against the Republican establishment and the Democrat establishment to get back here so my constituents could have some representation. Are you going to represent your constituents? You're going to let the Senate do it? Ingress, egress, all these types of things. Are we concerned about someone going into a flood zone or coming into a building where there's, emergency workers saying don't go back in there? I think there's a process called due process where if a law enforcement officer, you have the right to not to have an illegal search and seizure, right, unless there's some reason for them to do that search. I think that there would be a legitimate reason for them to say don't go back in that building. Now, on the other hand, if I'm up my hollow in Galapagos Ferry, I live a half mile off the road up a hollow with steep hills. I've got some supplies there to take care of myself and my family, and somebody comes and says, there's a flood coming, you need to get out of your house, and I say, no, thank you. I have the right to do that. Nobody has the right to drag me out of that hollow. There are lots of veterans in this room, and there were veterans in the chambers. We signed up to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. We're talking about rule of law here. If we don't have rule of law, if we don't follow the Constitution, then we're just a country or a state governed by whoever happens to have the most money or the most lobbyists on their side. Go ahead, vote against this. Go home and tell your constituents that they don't have the right to determine what happens with their lives. I ask for the yeas and nays.
Okay, debate is closed on the secondary amendment. The question is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Is the demand for a roll call sustained? Demand is sustained. The question is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 34 ayes, 63 nays, and 3 members absent. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. Clerk will please report the next secondary amendment.
Delegate Butler and others move to amend the amendment on page 7, section 6, line 85, following the word supplies by inserting the words, nor do restrictions on explosives and combustibles include fuels used for transportation, home heating, cooking, and other essential needs of life of our citizens.
Okay, the question is on the secondary amendment just read by the clerk. Chair will recognize the sponsor, Delegate Butler, or should be the gentleman on the 18th, Delegate Butler, to open debate on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment deals with a provision that allows the governor within the bill in front of us, allows the governor to control explosives and combustibles entirely. There is a provision in there that there's a provision already existing that says that he can't regulate guns, ammunition, gunpowder, and that type of thing. This just adds a provision that he also cannot regulate gasoline, diesel fuel, basically fuel and things we use to get ourselves around, to heat our homes with, or run generators, and so forth. And actually, combustibles, it was brought up to me that it could even include wood. So I think that we should leave our constituents with the ability to heat their homes and so forth. So I urge adoption of the amendment. Thank you.
The question is on the secondary amendment. Is there debate on the secondary amendment? The gentleman of 54th Delegate Pushkin is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Vice Chair Gilborg yield?
Yes, go ahead. Gentleman does yield.
Okay. With the amendment that's being offered, could that affect if the executive were to implement something prohibiting price gouging during a time of emergency for gasoline?
Explosives and combustibles not include firearms. I don't believe so. There's nothing about price gouging in here. Spend or limit the sale. Let me just make sure.
I apologize. Could you read how it would?
Okay, so this is how it would work. Page 7, line 85. Okay. Okay, so I'll read the full paragraph and then I'll insert the phrase of the amendment. So, what is that? Page 7, line 85. Okay, so to suspend or limit the sale, dispensing of transportation of explosives and combustibles, provided that explosives and combustibles do not include firearms, ammunition, components of ammunition, or ammunition reloading equipment and supplies. And then after supplies, the gentleman's amendment would then insert the phrase, nor do restrictions on explosives and combustibles include fuels used for transportation, home heating, cooking, and other essential needs of life of our citizens. It doesn't appear obvious to me that this would relate to price gouging. I believe that's in a separate section of code. So I hope that answers your question.
So you don't, in your opinion, this wouldn't preclude the executive, whether it's the governor or attorney general, from enforcing price gouging laws during a time of emergency?
Can you say that in the mic? I just had bad hearing.
In your opinion, this wouldn't preclude the executive from enforcing price gouging laws during
No, and I think the Attorney General really does that under price gouging laws, which is section, what's the section? Right, the age of enforcement, but that's in a different section. Price gouging laws are in a different section.
Okay, thank you,
So,
President.
yeah.
Okay, the question again is on the secondary amendment. Gentleman first, Doug McGeehan is recognized.
I agree with the amendment. I think it's good probably to define some of these terms here and ensure that, you know, combustibles and explosives in the colloquial sense or the technical sense that it's used in the old statute shouldn't entail, you know, home heating and cooking and other such supplies. So I agree with the amendment.
Are there other members who wish to speak to the adoption of the secondary amendment? Gentleman 98, Doug Espinoza is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Vice Chairman yield for a question?
Yes.
So trying to consider possible ramifications of this language, I understand, I think, the impetus for this proposed amendment. Let's say you had a gas station or gas stations located in an area of West Virginia that were being impacted by wildfires. Would this preclude the governor from stopping sale of gasoline at those gasoline stations within a wildfire impacted area?
Let me turn to the, put this amendment in context. Hold on, bear with me here. Trying to get used to this folder. All right, let's see. I'm going to read it again in context. Page 7, line 85, all right. You got it handy? And then he's adding. Let me just work this thing out. Matching up with that. Line 85. Nor due restrictions are. Okay, so the first product listed, fuels used for transportation. Yes, to answer your question, that would preclude them from doing that in your circumstance about a wildfire.
So again, just to be clear, we've got gas stations located in an area that's being impacted by wildfires, but if this amendment is adopted, this would preclude the chief executive from making what I think most of us would probably conclude was a pretty reasonable decision to close those gas stations so as not to place the public in danger.
You make a good point. Perhaps you could ask the gentleman to reform his amendment, if he'd be so willing.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Speaker, speak to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized.
So, again, I appreciate my good friend and colleague for, you know, his amendment, but yeah, I really think this comes down to having reasonable safeguards against the powers of the executive without preventing the executive from making proper decisions during a state of emergency. I believe that the underlying amendment and legislation, I think, goes a long ways towards helping build in safeguards that in the event that the executive does not utilize that authority properly, that we can rein that in. But I think the response that my esteemed colleague from the first gave to my question, I think points out the peril of trying to micromanage this down to the point where our chief executive can't make reasonable decisions to safeguard the public. If the executive does not utilize that authority properly, I believe the underlying amendment and the legislation provides the safeguards that we need in order to take action and to prevent a governor from misusing that authority. So for that reason, I will oppose this amendment because of what I think are fairly apparently unforeseen consequences that could arise from this adoption of this amendment. Thank you.
The gentleman from the 84th, Doug Jennings, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman from the first answer a couple questions?
If it's the Socratic method here. Go ahead.
I can't believe I'm standing up here with all my friends that I always vote with, and I'm going to be against it. But would
all right.
Would
I
this
belong in the back seat, maybe still.
Would this stop like I've been from Preston County? I've had several snowstorms. We can't get tankers in. Those tankers are out of the question. So then we have to ration our fuel to, say, water stations for the generators that are running at the water stations. We have to ration our fuel to the state road trucks trying to clear our roads. But if we adopt this, then we can't stop people from using it and hoarding it because they think they need it over what the first responders and people are trying to do the most good for the county. Is that correct?
If I understand you correctly, if such an order was anticipated to restrict the sale of transportation fuel, there would be a rush to grab as much as possible and hoard it, and then a lot of people will be shortchanged in that local area. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That's certainly something that happens often.
Yes, in Preston County, I've seen it happen, and I need...
Sometimes it's, obviously not in response to, say, a governor's declaration of an emergency. It's just people already know there's some sort of emergency. And remember when COVID hit, for whatever reason, there was a fanatical drive to empty every single department store of toilet paper, right? So it's the same sort of concept. And sometimes these things happen where, when emergency hits, there's a lot of panic and a rush to empty the shelves of retail stores.
So
but your point is well taken, though.
If we adopt this, then they won't be able to stop that, right?
Won't be able to stop the
rush to drain our supply, because like I said, I've seen where we can't get tankers in, so we got to use the supply that we have right now.
Right.
And if we adopt this, then we can't stop people from hoarding or running in and getting what they think they need to support them. Everybody's running a generator. That takes a lot of gas. Everybody's got their 5-gallon, 50-gallon drums. They're running down, filling them up. But if we adopt this, we can't stop that.
Yeah, just hold on. Let me look something up real quick to answer that, just to give a little bit more context of this. Bear with me, page 7 and 85. Hold on 1 second for you. So, just to provide you a little background on this certain statute in which the amendment seeks to alter, I believe the power granted to the chief executive under a state of emergency here is because all of these different items For instance, limit the sale, dispensing, or transportation of explosives, combustibles, and other such things. Those sort of were often assumed to go along with rioting. And so that was the genesis of why that language is included in the code of state of emergency, the state of emergency statute originally. So I have no problem with the amendment, you know, especially with the home heating, cooking, other essential needs. But I think part of the reason, the rationale behind the original language has been on the books for so long is because, you know, fuel is a combustible, and alcohol was struck, but that was in there. Explosives, combustibles, fuel, you know, rioting often goes with some of all those things, Molotov cocktails and that sort of thing. So that was the reason why those were all grouped together. When you have a state of emergency, sometimes it can be a rather chaotic situation, and sort of from chaos arises more chaos. So I'm just giving you some background on why it's included.
Thank you. Speak to the bill.
The gentleman is recognized.
I believe I'll be voting against this amendment. I've seen emergencies where we need to be able to make decisions, and it's for people, because some people become selfish, and you have to stop selfish people from harming or getting in front of other people. Some people will get in the back of the line and come up through, and other people will try to jump in front. And this allows people to jump in front, and I will be voting against it. Thank you.
Lady in 56, Young is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to let you guys know that I think the intent of the amendment is really good. I really do. I do think there's another way to solve this, though. If you look in the code, it's 5.1.26. It's under the governor, fuel emergency. There's an entire section that deals with this. That section of code expired in 1974. While we've been sitting here, I sent a request to bill drafting to just strike that line, which would fix all of these problems. So I'm against the amendment. I like where it's going, but I do think there could be some unintended consequences. But I think we could take care of this with that bill. So I don't have to be the sponsor. Whoever can have it once it comes back, but we can solve all the problems, I think. So thanks.
Good. The question is still on the secondary amendment as read by the clerk. Are there other members who wish to speak to this secondary amendment? If not, Chair will recognize the sponsor, Douglas Butler. Close debate on the secondary amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we're trying to legislate common sense to some extent here. Certainly, if there was a gas station or something that was in a fire zone, probably the owner of the gas station would turn the gas off. It was also brought to my attention by one of my colleagues here that probably if the citizens of the state know that the governor can shut off fuel supplies, that's probably going to make them more likely to go out and hoard it if they see that an emergency is pending. So actually, that might be kind of counterproductive if people are going out because they say, oh no, the governor, he has a right to shut the fuel off, we better go get all that we can. So that may end up backfiring, no pun intended there. Another part of this is that I think that we have a pretty low opinion of our constituents in some cases when we pass these types of restrictions on them. I think that people, if someone's going to buy gasoline for their generator, it might be because they need to keep their furnace blower going so that they can keep their kids warm. They might need gasoline for their chainsaw or who knows what. So the intent of the amendment was just to make it so that our citizens still have access to the fuel that they need for everyday life, and I urge passage of the amendment. Thank you.
Okay, the question is on the secondary amendment. It's read by the clerk. Those in favor of adoption of the secondary amendment as read by the clerk will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed will please say no. No. Okay. The roll call is demanded. Is demand sustained? Roll call is, demand is sustained. Question is, shall the secondary amendment be adopted? Those in favor of adoption will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 26 ayes, 69 nays, and 5 members absent. Less than a majority in the affirmative. The chair declares that amendment lost. The clerk will please report the next secondary amendment.
Delegate Capito moves to amend the amendment on page 6, section 6, line 45 by striking the words substantially relates to and inserting in lieu thereof the words arises from, and on page 6, section 6, line 48 by striking the words are substantially relating to and inserting in lieu thereof the words arise from.
Okay, the chair recognizes the gentleman in 55th, Delegate Capito, to explain the amendment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'll give folks a minute here. I did revise this amendment and add the language to another place in the strike and insert amendment to sync it up. But what I'm offering here is a cleaner and clearer way to achieve the purpose of this provision. I think we all know that this provision exists so that the governor cannot declare a state of emergency or declare a state of preparedness, end it, sort of reword it, and then start it again, so it's really a continuation of the same thing, and then it goes on infinitum. So I do, in fact, think that the language that is originally set forth in the strike and insert, which I can't find right now, does cause some potential for ambiguity as it relates to natural disasters. I know that's not what has occupied most of our time in this debate today, but a lot of this bill does relate to natural disasters, and the language substantially relates to the same circumstances when you think about a flood that occurs in the same river, but it happens 6 months apart. So a flood happens in a river in West Virginia, state of emergency is declared, it goes 60 days, it ends at 60 days, 5 years later, the same river floods because of rain or whatever it is. A technical reading could not allow for a response from the executive in that sense because it substantially relates to the exact same circumstance that the original state of emergency was declared for. So, in order to get and solve for that, my proposed language here is that it would have to arise from the same circumstances. So if you take the pandemic situation, any state of preparedness or any state of emergency that followed the original declaration of emergency by the government that arises from COVID-19 would need to pass this body's approval. And the same would go for any flooding situations that happen. So if you had a flood from a certain circumstance and there's a state of emergency that lasted 60 days and then 5 or 10 years later the same body of water flooded, the government would be able to respond immediately because it did not arise from the same circumstances. So, Mr. Speaker, that is a summarization of the secondary amendment. I urge adoption.
The question is on the secondary amendment just read by the clerk. Chair will recognize the gentleman in the 18th, Delegate Butler.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I pressed the button in error.
Understood. Question again is still on the secondary amendment as read by the clerk. Is there debate on the secondary amendment? Okay, if not, those in favor of adoption of the secondary amendment will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. Chair declares the secondary amendment adopted. Are there other secondary amendments? Okay, if not, the question is now on the primary amendment as amended. Is there debate on the primary amendment? The gentleman in the 18th, Delegate Butler, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this amendment bill, so to speak. I would urge members, if you're inclined, to pull up your legislative website and look at the U.S. Constitution so you can, or not the U.S. Constitution, the West Virginia Constitution, so you could follow along a little bit. As maybe you want to look for that, I'll take up a little bit of time here by again pointing out the executive order that called us into a state of emergency on March the 6th of 2020. And while most of us were probably not paying attention, the state of emergency was lifted a couple years later on the 5th day of May of 2023. It's almost 3 years of a state of emergency. So I commend everyone who's worked on this to try to limit the time frame of a state of emergency without any input from the legislature. I'm going to call your attention to the West Virginia Constitution a little bit, and I'm going to try to keep from reading verbatim to you, but here's the case I would like to make. And what I'm getting at is here, I don't think that what we're doing here is even constitutional. The underlying code is not constitutional. So we're trying to fix an unconstitutional code. And my grandmother always told me 2 wrongs don't make a right. So my preference would actually be to strike the whole emergency powers section in the code, put the power back where it belongs with the legislature. The legislature passes laws and the governor executes laws. So the West Virginia Constitution, Article 1, Section 3, continuity of constitutional operation. The provisions of the Constitution of the United States and the state are operative alike in a period of war as in times of peace, and any departure thereof or violation thereof under the plea of necessity or any other plea is subversive to good government and tends to anarchy and despotism. Then you go down to Article 5, Section 1, division of powers. The legislative, executive, and judicial departments shall be separate and distinct, so that neither shall exercise the powers properly belonging to either of the others, nor shall any person exercise the powers of more than one of them at the same time, except that the justices of the peace shall be eligible in the legislature. I came across someone recommended to me a Supreme Court case, State v. Bostick. And evidently this is a Supreme Court justice quote here. The well-settled division of powers and responsibilities of the 3 branches of state government have been previously outlined by this court as follows. Generally speaking, the legislature enacts law, the governor and various agencies of the executive implement the law, and the courts interpret the law, adjudicating individual disputes arising thereunder. And then he goes on, and this is in the quote that I found is emboldened, Article 5, Section 1 of the Constitution of West Virginia, which prohibits any one department of our state government. And again, this is a quote from the justice. Any one department of our state government from exercising the powers of the others is not merely a suggestion, it is part of the fundamental law of our state, and as such it must be strictly construed and closely followed. Here's a section of the Constitution that I actually had never noticed before until I started getting into some research here. Okay, well, the first one, we know this, the legislative power shall be vested in the Senate and the House of Delegates. The style of their acts shall be enacted by the legislature of West Virginia. Okay, here's the one that I hadn't seen before. Article 6, Section 54, continuity of government amended. So this is a circumstance where our Constitution was actually amended. The people of the state voted on this after the legislature put it up for a vote. So I'm going to read this. The legislature of West Virginia, in order to ensure continuity of state and local government operations in periods of emergency resulting from disasters caused by enemy attack. They contemplated enemy attack. So they're saying the legislature shall have the power and the immediate duty to provide for prompt and temporary cessation to the powers and duties of the public offices of whatever nature and whether filled by election or appointment, the incumbents of which may become unavailable for carrying out the powers and duties of such offices, and to adopt such other measures as they may see necessary and proper for ensuring the continuity of government operations. So what happened here, a little bit more research, is that in 1959, at a time when our world was, everyone felt in danger because of nuclear attack, the West Virginia legislature evidently thought, man, what if we were attacked, a nuclear attack, and people in the state, you know, we had a bombing or something, so several members were killed or they couldn't get to perform their duties. So they actually passed a constitutional amendment to allow them to appoint people to take their place in the legislature. And it was, they could appoint as many as, well, they had to appoint as many as 3, but they could appoint as many as 7. So that if Mason County was bombed and I couldn't get here, I would have 3 to 7 people already named who could come take my place. You know what they did? They took the responsibility upon themselves and kept the responsibility within the legislature. They didn't hand the power off to the governor. How easy would it have been to do that, which is what we're doing here. And if they could have done that, if they could have made a process where they could appoint their own replacements without doing a constitutional amendment, which is what I think it would require to give, again, I want to say this, I think it would require a constitutional amendment to give the governor emergency powers to make proclamations that have the force of law, which is what he was doing for 3 years. So if we want to give the governor that power, we can't even really do that if we're following the Constitution. We would have to do a constitutional amendment and tell our constituents, hey, we think there are some disasters that could come up, and we want to give our responsibilities, the things that we've swore to do on their behalf, we want to give that power to the governor. Then our constituents will be able to vote on that constitutional amendment and say, yeah, I think that's a good idea, or it's not. And this is interesting because, as we know, we had some amendments on the ballot here recently, and they all failed. So again, I want to reiterate, if this was something that could be, that legislature in 1959 felt that they could do by statute, why did they go to the trouble of doing a constitutional amendment? Okay, moving on in the Constitution, Article 7, Section 5, the chief executive powers. The chief executive power shall be vested in the governor, who shall take care that the laws be faithfully executed. I see no place in here where it gives him, in the Constitution, where it says he can make laws. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against this bill because, as I said, my grandma said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. I'm tempted, but I'm not going to. I'm tempted to move that this go back to committee so we could actually fix this correctly. But I'm not going to do that because I know some deals have been struck and we feel like that's what needs to be done. But I think we're setting very bad precedent here, and we actually are failing to uphold our responsibilities. So I'm going to vote no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from the 42nd, Doug Steele, is recognized.
I agree wholeheartedly with the delegate from Mason. This state existed for 150 years without this section of code. And you'd be hard-pressed to get me to believe we haven't had a flood, a forest fire, or outbreak of some type of communicable disease in the preceding 150 years that our legislature didn't get together and take care of. And as he points out, and he and I share an office now, so I got the elongated version of this. You guys got the truncated version, but I learned a lot, you know, studying with the delegate this issue. And one of the things that strikes me about it is we somehow operated this state for 150 years without handing the governor the ability to write law. And we did that. We did it before I got here. Did it for probably most of the people in here got here. But it was recently enough that the ink's not quite dry on this statute. And while there wasn't a challenge to it in court over the last couple years that gave the court the opportunity to really evaluate and tell us, as a neutral arbitrator, of what the confines of this should be. I undoubtedly think by what we're doing today, we're setting it up for that to happen again. There are some limitations here. And you know, I make no qualms. I'm not going to go as far as the delegate from Mason. I told folks I'd do whatever I could to limit this, and I think that's probably what everybody in here said. But I can respect the principled stance of two wrongs don't make a right. And I would hope that we could have, over the last 3 years, came up with a process for, in an emergency, this legislature to get here and take action and govern, rather than hand our lawmaking ability to the executive branch. I would have thought that we could have come up with a process that if we couldn't get together, that we could meet remotely somehow. The state of Virginia did it, figured out how to run a legislature remotely. I remember talking to some of the delegates in Virginia back in 2021 when they were debating and voting on bills from their offices. Our Constitution was derived from that one. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between West Virginia and Virginia, but we didn't do that. We didn't do that. And I'm disappointed in that. I'm disappointed that we somehow didn't assert that this House, that this body, this legislature, that we didn't assert that we make the law. We don't just make the law when it's convenient. We don't just make the law when everything's peaceful. As a matter of fact, that Constitution is built to provide those safeguards, not in times of ease, but in the most dire times, when enemies are at the gate, when fire is within the camp. That's when that Constitution is supposed to spring into action. When your instinct tells you to do something different, and you just go, whoa, this is going against our principles. And I think that's what the delegate is talking about. And by passage of this, and I'm going to vote on it, we are aiding and abetting the abdication of our constitutional duty to enact law. Fundamental to the Republic is the separation of powers. We don't have a republic if we don't maintain that separation. The people that have the ability to write the law should never have the ability to enforce it. The people that enforce the law should never have the ability to write it. The people that judge the law should not have the ability to write or enforce it. That's separation of powers in a nutshell. When this was originally done, we existed for 150 years without it. And I hope that we'll find a way in the future in here to cease with, this is what they'll take, this is what they're willing to do, and start asserting what the people sent us up here to do.
The gentleman from the 54th, Doug Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of inquiry. The question before us is a vote on the amendment, correct?
The gentleman is correct.
So if the amendment were to fail, we go back to the Senate bill, correct?
We do.
Thank you.
We would take up then Senate Bill 128 as received. The gentleman is correct.
And thank you.
Okay, the question again is still on the primary amendment. Is there debate on the primary amendment? Okay, if not, Chair will recognize the gentleman from the first, Delegate McGinn, to close debate on the primary amendment. Okay, if not, those in favor of adoption of the primary amendment will please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. Okay, the ayes have it. Chair declares the primary amendment adopted. Are there other primary amendments to the bill? If not, the clerk will read the bill a third time.
Senate Bill 128, clarifying authority of governor and legislature to proclaim and declare state of emergency and preparedness.
Okay, the question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk gets from the first. Was the gentleman seeking recognition? Gentleman is seeking recognition. We have not taken the vote. Chair will recognize the gentleman from the 1st District, McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Was indisposed there for a second. For years now, I think we've learned quite different things from our experience underneath the pandemic. Some good, some bad. And so the underlying strike insert, the bill before us, that addresses these so-called emergency powers with the executive, it has really nothing to do with personalities. It really has nothing to do with certain factions within this chamber or within the chamber across the hall or within the personalities downstairs. It really has to do with certain ideas, and that's what I usually gravitate towards, ideas. And the idea really is that we really, going forward in the future, cannot abide by something that is rather antithetical to the American tradition, and that is, to sort of simplify it, one-man rule in perpetuity. So I want to stress that it's a very simple concept. I want to make sure that we all know that this is really not to do with any one personality. It's just really to address future generations so that we sort of restore, we learn from our experiences, we learn from our mistakes, and we ensure that future generations have this proper check and balance that we've all learned in eighth grade civics for the most part. And to restore that with this bill, I think is one of the utmost priorities that this chamber should really drive to get across the finish line. So I just wanted to offer a few words, and with that, I hope we can at least, in a bipartisan effort, light up the board green. Thank you very much.
Okay, again, is there debate on the bill? Okay, if there's not, the question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result on this question. There are 93 ayes, 3 nays, and 4 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Senate Bill 128, clarifying authority of governor and legislature to proclaim and declare state of emergency and
Are there
preparedness.
amendments to the title?
Delegate Phillips moves to amend the title.
The question before the House is the adoption of the title amendment. Those in favor of adoption of the title amendment will please say aye. Those opposed will please say no. The ayes have it. The chair declares the title amendment adopted. The title as amended by the House will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
House Bill 2310, provide the Division of Motor Vehicles authority to develop an antique fleet program so that multiple antique motor vehicles may utilize a single registration plate.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from 68, Delegate Phillips, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The purpose of House Bill 2310 is to provide the Division of Motor Vehicles authority to develop an antique fleet program so multiple antique motor vehicles may utilize a single registration plate. I urge passage.
The question now before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? Gentleman from the 54th, Delegate Pushkin, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the Chairman yield?
Chairman does yield for a question.
What's the definition of a fleet?
5 or more vehicles.
Okay, so this bill would only affect people with 5 or more antique vehicles?
Correct.
Thank you. May I speak to the bill?
Gentleman is recognized.
You know, I really enjoyed the previous discussions that we had on who we're here to represent. If we're listening to our constituents or not. I haven't heard anything from constituents with over 5 antique vehicles that want their lives to be a little easier by only getting one plate to pass around to 5 of their antique cars. I can't really understand why this bill is even before us. So I can't in good conscience vote for something if I don't understand what the problem is. I've not heard a big problem from antique car owners that they have to buy too many a license plate for each of their vehicles like everybody else has to do. Like every single one of us has to do, and every one of our constituents has to have license plates on their vehicles. So I'm not really exactly sure who we're trying to help here. I can't vote for something I really don't understand why we're doing it unless I hear a really good explanation of why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. I'll be voting no. I would urge the body to reject it as well. It's not necessary, and nobody really asked you for it.
The question again is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? The gentleman from the 47th, Longenegger is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an interesting bill. I may go out and buy 2 more antique vehicles just so I can qualify for this. I got 3 antique vehicles. One's my daily driver, one's my wife's daily driver, and one's my old farm pickup truck, but that's all banged up. But no, this bill doesn't pick my wallet or infringe upon my freedoms, and it doesn't cost the state 1 penny. I support the bill.
Is there debate on the bill? If not, does the chairman wish to close debate on the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not everything we do here has the profound implications of the last bill we just debated. There are things we attend to here in the regular course of business, and this is one of them. As my friend from the 47th said, this bill is not infringing on anyone's freedom. It's not costing the state anything. The Department of Motor Vehicles is still going to get the registration fee. It does make it a little easier for antique car collectors to have a plate. They can go to an auction, buy a new vehicle, put it on, drive it home, and be legal until they get that vehicle registered in 30 days. And I urge passage. Thank you.
Question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 90 ayes, 3 nays, and 7 members absent. Majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2310, provide the Division of Motor Vehicles authority to develop an antique fleet program so that multiple antique motor vehicles may utilize a single registration plate.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on 3rd reading.
House Bill 2564, repeal of administrative hearing procedures for DUI offenses.
Are there objections to having this bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 55th, Doug Capito, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prior to 2020, in DUI proceedings in the state of West Virginia, we had sort of a dual proceeding situation or scenario or structure in West Virginia, where there was an Office of Administrative Hearings that dealt with license revocation, and then the magistrate that dealt with the criminal side of the proceeding. In 2020, we eliminated and terminated the Office of Administrative Hearing. This bill simply goes into the code and removes references to OAH, which are no longer needed. I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. Majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2564, repeal of administrative hearing procedures for DUI offenses.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be in the remainder of the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on 3rd reading.
House Bill 2602, reestablishing certain specialized school service personnel classifications.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? If not, the gentleman from the 43rd, Delegate Tony, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 2602. This is bill corrects a computer-generated error made during the 22 regular session. During that session, House Bill 4829 inadvertently omitted certain definitions from the current code language within the bill. The bill reinserts the proper code language that exists prior to the error that occurred during the passage of House Bill 4829. With the passage of that bill, what it did is it took the language out of it. We've already got it in code for the pay raises. We're just putting that language back in so the counties can employ those individuals. That's the purpose of the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I urge passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Is there debate on the bill? If not, those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent. A majority of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
House Bill 2602, reestablishing certain specialized school service personnel classifications.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. Gentleman from the 96th.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill take effect from its passage.
The gentleman from the 96th moves that House Bill 2602 be made effective from passage. Those in favor of that motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there are 92 ayes, 0 nays, and 8 members absent. 2/3 of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Chair is advised that the Senate did send Senate Bill 128 to our possession, having been made effective from passage. So at this time, the chair will recognize the gentleman from 96 for purpose of a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move that Senate Bill 128 take effect from its passage.
The gentleman from the 96th, delegate householder, moves that Senate Bill 128 be made effective from passage. Those in favor of that motion will please vote aye. Those opposed will please vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On this question, there were 90 ayes, 1 nay, and 9 members absent. 2/3 of members voting in the affirmative. The chair declares that bill effective from passage. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there other bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2754, relating to immunizations performed in a pharmacy.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2757, relating to amending eligibility for the West Virginia Invest Program, providing that a not-for-profit hospital-based allied health program is eligible for the West Virginia Invest Program.
For what purpose does the gentleman from the 52nd Delegate Rowe seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is there a fiscal note on this? I pressed on the machine, but I'm just wondering if there's a fiscal note.
On committee substitute for House Bill 2757?
Yes, sir.
The chair does not know. Does the lady from the 73rd, Douglas Summers, aware of whether there was a fiscal note on this bill?
There is no fiscal note, as there's no increased cost to the program.
Even though it includes private schools in the program?
The amount of money allotted to West Virginia Invest is in the budget, and we appropriate that money. So the budget will decide the amount of money that goes there, not this bill.
In other words, there's no estimate by any financial officer of what this bill could cost?
It will not cost anything additional because we set the amount in the budget. So I think West Virginia Invest in the budget is $7 million. This just increases the people that could apply for that money by 2. Last year, it was only about $5 million of that was expended. So there was $2 million more dollars available. We are increasing the opportunity to apply for those funds.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, again, are there amendments to committee substitute for House Bill 2757? If not, the bill will be advanced to third reading. Next bill on second reading.
House Bill 2776, updating meaning of federal adjusted gross income and certain other terms used in West Virginia Personal Income Tax Act.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2777, updating federal taxable income and other terms in West Virginia Corporation Net Income Tax Act.
Are there amendments? If not, the bill will be advanced. Are there other bills on second reading? If not, bills on first reading.
House Bill 2113, modifying the criminal penalties imposed on a parent, guardian, or custodian for child abuse.
Bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2171, removing obsolete provisions regarding DOH standards for studded tires and chains.
The bill will be advanced.
House Bill 2531, requiring cooperation between the rail company and the Division of Highways when construction or maintenance activities are conducted by the company.
The bill will be advanced. Are there other bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Gentleman from the 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues Bridges, Storch, and Ward.
Are there objections to leaves of absence being granted? No objections are heard. Leaves of absence will be granted. Introductions. Introductions. Gentleman from the 9th, Douglas Barnhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got another guest here today up in the, I was just alluded to it, up in the West Gallery. We've got my good friend, Mr. Steve Ritter, who is the County Commissioner in Ritchie County. Please give him a warm welcome, please.
Gentleman from the 46th, Douglas Honaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to direct your attention to the South Gallery, introduce a very special guest from Greenbrier County, not only one of our commissioners, but the new president of the Greenbrier County Commission, Ms. Tammy Tencher.
Other introductions? Miscellaneous business. Gentleman from the 96th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcement, that the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Wednesday, January 25th, 2023.
Are there announcements? Gentleman from the 43rd, Douglas Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, January 25th at 2 p.m. in the Education Committee room. The agenda is posted. Also, Republican members of the committee that can make it, we will caucus today at 2 o'clock in the chairman's office.
Gentleman from the 1st, Douglas McGeehan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet tomorrow at 3 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee room. 3, right? 3 o'clock. See you there. Agenda is posted.
Gentleman from the 51st, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. in the committee meeting room. The agenda will be posted. The Republicans will caucus at 12:45 p.m.
Gentleman from the 39th, Douglas Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Rulemaking Review Committee will meet at 9 a.m. tomorrow, January 25th, in the Senate Judiciary Committee room. The agenda has been posted and emailed out to all members.
Gentleman from the 91st, Douglas Forst.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow at 9:15 in the House Judiciary Committee room. Republican members will come to the caucus at 9. The agenda will be posted, and members are asked to bring their laptops.
Gentleman from the 42nd, Douglas Steele.
Mr. Speaker, the subcommittee on House Bill 2251 that includes myself, the delegate from the 76th, and the delegate from the 44th will meet in the Judiciary Committee room directly following the session. However, if there is a conflict, because we were thinking this would be noon, we could meet in the alternative in the chairman's office or the vice chairman's office.
Okay, the gentleman from the 72nd, Douglas Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Volunteer Fire Departments and Emergency Medical Services will meet at 9 a.m. Wednesday morning in the House Finance Committee room. Please bring your computer, and the agenda has been posted.
The gentleman from the 21st, Douglas Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure will meet today at 2 p.m. in the House Education room. The agenda has been posted. Republican members will caucus 15 minutes prior to the meeting.
Gentleman from the 99th, Douglas Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Economic Development and Tourism has rescheduled its meeting to 4 o'clock today in the House Finance Room, 4 o'clock today. Also tomorrow at 1 p.m. in your GovOrg Committee Room, your new Energy Caucus will be meeting. The Honorable Mitch Carmichael will be there to do a presentation, and lunch will be provided. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 2nd, Douglas Teslo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Energy and Manufacturing will meet today at 2 o'clock in the Judiciary Meeting Room, and we ask that you bring your computers. Thank you.
Gentleman from the 47th, Douglas Longenegger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security will meet tomorrow, Wednesday, January the 25th at 10 a.m. in the East Wing Committee Room, room 215E. The agenda will be posted. Please bring your laptops.
Gentleman from the 25th, Douglas Hornbuckle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats will caucus in the Roosevelt Room immediately upon adjournment.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question is on the motion by the gentleman from the 96th that the House stand adjourned at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor of the motion will please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. We are adjourned at 11 a.m. tomorrow.